What is up, fam? Good to see you. Welcome to Cognitive Dissonance, the channel where I try to sort through some of the crazy shit going on around us. And man, I just don't know. I don't know. Good to see you guys. Hey, Wingman, what up? What up, Dave MC? Rainbow Snuggle Fritz, Orion's Riddle, Thumper Rose. Hello, hello. What up, Chef Matt? Good to see you. Becky Lou, glad you're in the house. What up, Patricia Sirdahl? I see you asking about Luke Sly Talker. He was just on with me and J Bell Friday, and Onka Vonka, as a matter of fact. Speaking of Onka Vonka, I don't know what's going on with Matrix Codebreaker, but prayers and love, man, prayers and love. Um, yeah, good to see you guys. So, all right. Normally, I come with some woo, and this is the point where I play my little lizard that tells you not to believe anything that I have to say. I'm not doing that tonight because I'm super serial today, guys. I'm super serial. I want you to know that every bit of this, I am behind 100%, right? Um, we've had some really crazy shit happen over the past couple of weeks, right? Not the least of which is the Biden administration's attempt at a vaccine mandate. And we've seen what half of the country come out and what they're calling the vaccine rebellion, right? Where states are standing up and just saying they're not going to have this shit. As a matter of fact, today, a judge in New York, a federal judge in New York blocked the state from imposing vaccine mandates on medical workers. They had filed suit saying that their constitutional rights were being violated because the state's mandate disallowed religious exemptions. I don't know if you know this, but in the state of New York, or in the city of New York specifically, like they were pushing the whole vax pass and vax mandate thing, regardless of it, with no religious exemptions, with no exemptions if you're physically unable to get the vaccine. So if you've got a medical condition that would just not allow you to get the vaccine, well, apparently you can't work, you can't function. You can't participate in society. Like you're just screwed. So needless to say, people are pissed. I'm pissed. There have been so many things over the past year that have just made my blood boil, right? Not, them calling half of the country domestic terrorists, when the DHS put out that alert talking about freaking anybody coming against, the COVID narrative, or, anybody talking about 9/11, whatever, like just crazy shit. And it really got me thinking. Yes, Afro Puffs. Yes, I did the puffs today. Thanks, Belushi, for the cookie. What up, honey? Thanks, Hang 10, for the can. A can for me. I can't ask for any more. Yeah, I'm a fan of the whole fuck you exemption, Putsy Woo. Sounds like a plan to me. What up, Woke One? Bruh. Good to see ya. Good to see ya. Stephanie, Wonder Mod, Suitor. Hey, Suitor. Good to see you guys. Yeah, so it really got me to thinking, like, most of us have probably heard of the Federalist Papers, right? These are the documents that were written to defend the creation of the Constitution. I remember when I was in college and I was doing my undergrad for political science, and they covered quite a bit of the Federalist Papers, right? Even AP American History, I think they had us read, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 Federalist Papers, and maybe one. There was like one Anti-Federalist paper that was mentioned. Did you guys even know that there was a grouping of documents also written by the founding fathers, that argued against the Constitution for a lot of the same reasons we are crying about right now? Give me a 1 in the chat if you knew, if you were familiar with the Anti-Federalist Papers, right? So what are they? Who were these people, right? So the Anti-Federalists were people that really believed that the Constitution, the way that it was written, was going to lead to this excessive government overreach. That they had just fought a war against a tyrannical elite, and they were like, we're not doing this shit. Thank you, Vettenmore, for the cookie. Yeah, they had just fought a war against just the predator class, the predator elites, and they were like, we ain't doing this, right? We ain't doing this. And they put up some really strong arguments for why this was just in its form, in the form that it was presented to them, why it was just probably not going to work out the way that everybody expected. Okay. Now remember, prior to the Constitution, the United States, well, it was we were operating as a confederacy. We were working under the Articles of Confederation, which had a very weak central government. There was no like overarching legislative, or sorry, executive or judicial. All we had was a Congress. We had a legislative branch. It was very weak. It wasn't funded. Taxes weren't really able to be enforced. There was no standing military, and this led to some problems. Hey, Stacks, thanks for the shades. This led to some real problems, right? And primarily, the Articles of Confederation were extremely hard to amend. It needed all 13 states to agree, right? And after what they called Shays' Rebellion, which for those of you that have heard about this or that remember, there was literally a revolt that was led by a guy named Daniel Shays in Massachusetts over massive issuance of foreclosures on farms, due to economic issues. They were these people were pissed about corruption in the government. They were pissed about nepotism and what they saw as the beginning of the coalescence of a real influence of special interest groups. And when they started losing their farms, they were livid. And they rose up. This was an armed uprising in Western Massachusetts, and they were pissed about taxes, dude. They were pissed about taxes. I mean, as all good Americans should be, because as we know here, taxation is theft, right? We saw AOC in that shitty ass dress yesterday, tax the rich. No, her shit should have said taxation is theft, right? Then maybe I could have got behind that message. But the shenanigans that we're seeing, I mean, we've got these people that go, and thank you for the ship, Belushi. Much love to you. We've got these people that are playing at activism, right? They're pretending they're activists. They go with their clothes that have these stupid messages on them, and that's supposed to be moving to some people, right? But I mean, really, they're puppets, man. We know that they're puppets. But in any case, Shays' Rebellion, it was an armed uprising against what they saw as corruption, overreach of government, taxation. They were taking their homes. They were mad, right? Now, the problem is they didn't have any standing army to come in and quash this, right? The states had to voluntarily, under the Articles of Confederation, send military in to deal with problems. And most of them just weren't having that. There was a real dichotomy between farmers or agrarian society, which were the majority of the people at the time, and these manufacturing centers that they just felt like represented special interest groups. These would have been I guess the progressives of the day, right? So after Shays' Rebellion, the people were like, well, we got to do something. This Articles of Confederation thing, we need to get together and talk this out. And they initially were supposed to be discussing amending, but Rhode Island didn't even send people. Rhode Island, one of the states at the time, didn't even send representatives to the convention to discuss rewriting the Articles of Confederation. They were like, man, listen, this is all some shenanigans. We ain't having none of it. So when our founding fathers got there, they were like, you know what? We need a whole new system. We need a whole new system. We need something that gives us a stronger central government, a way to fund a military. We need a way to enforce taxation. We need a way to make the states kind of subservient to this new centralized government. And so they started having debates, and what ended up being writing what we know today as our U.S. Constitution. Hey, Bella214, thank you for the can. What's going on over here? Yeah, $30,000 dinner plate. Exactly, Jorge. Just right. These people are playing at being activists, but there's nothing new under the sun, people. All of the things we're pissed about now, the Anti-Federalists knew this was coming, and they gave very potent arguments, right, against why this new central power was going to eventually grow into a horrific problem. And I really think, and even though they knew it might not be at the time of them making these arguments, they knew that in the future this is where we would end up. And damn it if we aren't here. Damn it if we aren't here, right? Um, so just to give you guys a little bit of background, I'm going to play this for you, and then I'm going to go through some of these Anti-Federalist papers and tell you a little bit about who the Anti-Federalist writers were, and I'm going to break down some of the papers for you. Now, this is just part one. It's kind of an introductory thing. It's really been bothering me because, like I said, these are ideas that I am hearing espoused across platforms all the time, and I want you guys to know that you're not alone, man. You're not alone. We were never alone. Our founding fathers foresaw this and gave us some guidance on it, and we're going to talk about that. But check this out first.
Welcome to Hip Use History. We're going to knock you up with some feds and anti-feds in this quick lecture, guys. We've touched upon it in other lectures, but I think it deserves special focus because it's muy importante. So giddy up for the learning, guys. Why don't we go get her done right now? Feds and anti-feds. So, the summer of 1787 is going to bring us to these two groups, the Feds and the Anti-Feds, during the Constitutional Convention, really during the ratification process. You have to remember that the delegates of the convention in 1787 in Philadelphia that wrote that Constitution did it by bypassing the old Constitution. They violated the Articles of Confederation where you needed 13 out of 13 states agreeing in order to amend itself. So they're not amending the Articles of Confederation, they're throwing that stuff in the garbage and they're starting all over, which is revolutionary and illegal. But either way you cut it, they write that Constitution, and certainly you can go watch other videos that talk about what they put in that Constitution, but the main concept is they're strengthening the role of the federal government. In a sense, they're really creating centralized authority with taxing power, and that's a pretty big deal. So when they go to ratify that sucker, we have basically two groups that kind of break out. We have the Federalists, which becomes the Federalist Party. Really, the only Federalist president was John Adams. James Madison was a Federalist originally. I think George Washington would probably classify him as a Federalist. But you also have big names like Alexander Hamilton. You have John Jay. You have some big, heavy hitters that are going to argue in those Federalist Papers, those 85 essays, that this is the right balance in federalism, and this is what we need. We need a large republic with a stronger central government to be the glue to keep us all together. And you know, even in the ratification process, it shows you a lot in terms of them really seeing us a country of people. They don't go to the state legislatures for this Constitutional Convention ratification process. They go to people conventions in the states, and all states had elections where they elected delegates to this new convention, and each state voted, and eventually 9 out of 13 states were needed to ratify that, and they kind of just made that number up. But Federalists are going to be the ones who wrote the Constitution and who believe in this stronger role of the federal government, a larger republic. You know, if anything, they would say the states have a role, the states have the Senate. The Senate was elected by state legislatures. They represent the states. The House represents the people. This is the perfect balance. But when we go to that ratification process, we also have a large number of people that are turning against this new Constitution, and they are labeled anti-federalists. Originally, they wanted to be called the Federalists because they thought they had the right balance, but they got nicknamed the Anti-Feds, so there you go. We have Anti-Feds like Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, William Randolph, George Clinton, George Mason, and even Thomas Jefferson, even though they shipped him off to Paris. The Anti-Feds' main argument is, number one, this is an illegal move. Number two, where are our liberties? We don't trust this new big federal government. They're going to take our rights away. And they're not going to be looking out for the interest of the smaller states, of the rural areas. And that's really what's represented by the Anti-Feds, rural America, the South, farmers, debtors, as opposed to the Federalists, who are really represented by manufacturers and artisans and big city interests. So that's the main two groups, guys. The Federalists, which support the new federal Constitution, and you have the Anti-Feds, who are really in love with the Articles of Confederation, and if anything, would be okay with maybe amending that document, but certainly not throwing it out, baby, with the bathwater. So what's going to happen? Well, eventually it's going to get ratified with 9 out of 13 states, and a Bill of Rights is going to be added to the Constitution in order to garner the rest of the support, all 13 states eventually, and that's going to protect those civil liberties from the federal government, as well as maintaining in the 9th and 10th Amendments some state power, so some of those fears of the anti-feds could be calmed down a little bit. So what happens after that? The Federalist Party runs its course. We have John Adams, and after that it kind of dies away. It becomes the Whigs, and eventually it's kind of reborn as a northern nationalistic Republican Party. What happens to the anti-feds? They label themselves the Anti-Administrational Party and later become Jeffersonian Republicans or the Democratic Republicans, and that's the forerunner of the Democratic Party of the South, Andrew Jackson. So there you go, guys. We hope you know a little bit more about the feds and the anti-feds, and giddy up for that. So we'll see you guys next time that you press my buttons. And
So I mean, that's interesting. I see Thumper Rose. I see you mentioned in the Bill of Rights. You know, it's crazy because obviously these are amendments, right? Because the Constitution was not written with the Bill of Rights. In fact, at the Philadelphia Convention, there were a lot of arguments for and against what eventually came to be called the Bill of Rights. People refusing to sign because there wasn't one. Yet Federalists generally argued that a Bill of Rights wasn't needed because the Constitution only granted to the federal government the powers that were specifically enumerated. The Anti-Federalists were the one that felt like an explicit list of rights reserved for individuals was necessary to protect the freedoms that they had been fighting for in the revolution. You got to remember, these guys came out of what they saw as a very, you know, as a very authoritarian monarchy. They were pissed, and they didn't want to leave it up to be intuited that we had these rights. They wanted it on paper. They wanted it specified. They wanted people to know these are absolutes, right? Which is how we ended up with the Bill of Rights in the first place. Um, and I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that because there were anti-federalist papers written about that specifically, about the issue that there was no initially Bill of Rights included with the Constitution, which, you know, thank God these guys put up a fight. So the Federalist Papers were very well organized. They were published in newspapers and stuff across the country. It was an early form of propaganda campaign. And on the other side, rather disorganized. As a matter of fact, the Anti-Federalist Papers weren't even organized into a coherent collection until sometime in the 60s in Chicago, I believe, the University of Chicago, maybe, I could be wrong on that. Somebody finally pulled them all together and put them, according to dates, put them into a collection so that we see them how they are now. But this was largely true to form, kind of disorganized arguments. They were also published in newspapers, but there were speeches given and there were notes taken that have now been collected and put into what we call the Anti-Federalist Papers. So sort of this taken the form that we see today. But who were the Anti-Federalist writers? I mean, it was kind of a mixed group. Like some of these guys were famous, some of them were virtually unknown, most of them published anonymously. Some of these guys, we still don't know who they were. We still don't know who they were. They were north, south. I mean, they were farmers, soldiers. They were rich, poor. Slave owners, not slave owners. This was a diverse group of people, and like he mentioned, I mean, the Anti-Fed papers include speeches by Patrick Henry, Melancton Smith. Most of the Anti-Federalist essays that appeared in the newspapers during the ratification debate were published under pseudonyms, usually referring to Roman history, right? The famous ones are written by guys that called themselves like Brutus and Cato, right? Defenders of the Roman Republic, because that's how they saw themselves. That they were defending true republicanism, right? And they felt like this expansion of a centralized, a federal government was going to crush the states. It was going to crush personal liberties. It was going to inevitably lead to extensive government overreach, that we would have a tyranny of the majority over the minority, that it would, that the way the Constitution was written, that we would be subject to the whims of culture and the elites and whatever was posh at the time. The primary concerns of the Anti-Federalists, centered on freedom and power, which are issues that I find myself consumed with all the time, right? Thank you, 123SKG, for the shades. Much love to you. Thank you guys for donations. while I'm thinking about it, you can donate directly at loyal2thefoil.com or via Cash App, which is listed in the description on YouTube below. Gold pills, I love you guys. Thank you so much. You have no idea what it means to me, truly. Um, but yeah, I mean, most of these concerns were centered on freedom and power. I mean, they just fought a war for independence from what they considered to be like a despotic monarchy that answered to nobody. And the Anti-Federalists really feared creating a new central power in the United States that might eventually resemble another version of the British crown that they just despised, right? So dividing the power among the 13 original states seemed like a better idea to them at the time than concentrating it in the hands of a stronger central government. I mean, no doubt. Like when George Washington decided to run for president, and his lack of interest in becoming anything like a king, right? That allayed some fear, but not all. And like I said, the Anti-Federalists were concerned that the individual states would eventually give up all of their rights to the new central government. You know, so they felt like investing in states' rights seemed like a better way to guarantee individual freedoms. And this is, like I said, this is a debate that's resonated through American history. I mean, we are seeing it play out again today. The Constitution had written in things like this, like the Supremacy Clause, where the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution um, basically meant that federal law takes precedence over state law and even state constitutions. And then they had arguments with things like the Necessary and Proper Clause, right? That gives to Congress what are considered implied powers. Powers that are assumed to be true without being specifically stated. And this is why these guys were truly arguing for a Bill of Rights. Like, how did they know how far they would take this? Right? So, it was a good argument. They really believed that limited government led to more freedom for everybody. And that's supposed to be the platform of the Republican Party now. A limited government with very specific goals that does not infringe upon the rights of the individual and to a large degree preserves the decision-making power of the individual states. I mean, this is the same reason we argue against the New World Order, right? What do non-elected people in Switzerland know about what you need in Montana? What, for that matter, what do people in New York know about what people in Texas want? This is why we need local government action. This is why in the midst of what's going on now, I say all the time, these things have to be bottom up. You've got to get involved locally, and your best first move is just, I will not comply. I know you guys have heard this across channels and across platforms lately, but it's at the moment, this is where you start. This is where you start. I mean, these guys felt like the Constitution in its form, without the Bill of Rights, right, would not be subject to the will of the people, that it would be dominated by special interests. They noted on numerous occasions the lack of term limits, which is something these people still have not addressed, and they really feared that this would create a new aristocracy. I mean, how many of these people in the House and in the Senate have been there for God only knows how long, right? They become entrenched. It's crazy to note, but the average population per U.S. House district in 1790 was about 38,000, right? But now, on average, there's about one rep per every 700,000 people. So the anti-feds definitely had a point. I mean, how can one person represent the interests of 700,000 people, especially one entrenched person that's been in power for God knows how long? Like, I don't know, take Pelosi, for example. Do you think she really represents the interests and the will of the people in her district? Maxine Waters? And this is on both sides too. Keep it 100. This goes both ways, right? These people become entrenched. They get that money. They get a taste for that power. And that was another thing. The Anti-Federalists absolutely believed that the tendency of people that ended up with power was to grow that power, was to continue to exert that power. Is there something going on in the YouTube chat? Golden Crisp, did I miss it? If so, much love to you guys. Keep it, keep it frosty, man. Keep it frosty. Um, but I mean, do these people really represent the will of their constituents, right? The anti-feds, I mean, look, they argued for term limits for how long? We're still not there, right? Which is crazy, which is crazy. They felt like democracy should be run locally by the people, and reflect ideals and specific interests of an area. Like I said, it's the same argument we give now against global government. The propensity for power to corrupt uh, is horrific, and it seems to happen. It seems to happen all the time. I mean, some of these people might run as idealists, right? They run, they're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change, I'm going to go fight the fight. They get in there, they get a little taste of power and money, you know, people paying attention to what they have to say, and then they're like, well, I'll negotiate, right? I'll negotiate. And eventually they end up so far from where they started that they shouldn't be there in the first place. I mean, one of the most famous anti-federalists was Patrick Henry. And look what that dude said. Give me liberty or give me death, right? Like, he was really worried about tyranny. His argument was that if we aren't free, then a strong central government doesn't even matter. I mean, that's authoritarian soup, man. Yes, Frosty likes some frosted tips. Exactly. Exactly. Karen Hare, check my cat. Let me take a look. Thumper Rose says, without elections, our will cannot be represented. Yes. Yes, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. Um, and speaking of elections, let me say something else. I see the stuff coming out, like I'm just going to use California for example because that's the issue for right now. You know, people like asking, what's the point? Their people are going and telling them they've already voted. There's a bajillion mail-in ballots being mailed to whoever without even asking for it. Like, people feel like there's some kind of shenanigans going on with the election, and they're asking, what's the point? That's what they want you to think. That's what they want you to think. They want you to think that it's not even worth getting involved. It's not even worth making your voice heard. I disagree. I disagree. I don't give a shit if they did say it's rigged. I would still go to vote if I lived in California. I'm still going to vote in 2022, and I'm damn sure going to vote in 2024. Right? And I'm going to continue to run my mouth because that's just what I do here. Right? That's just what I do here. Yes, Karen here. Thank you for your support. I don't see it yet. I'm sure my tech is slow. Man, my tech is slow. But much love to you and thank you. Yeah, so don't let, because that can we have to cover the news, and putting out the information like the people being told that they already vote. I mean, that could, yes, it lets us know something might be going on, but it also can make people feel like, what's the point? And I don't ever want you guys to feel like, what's the point in participating in your political process? That is exactly what these guys were talking about. They don't want the individuals to feel like they have no voice, right? So do it anyway, guys. But back to the anti-Fed papers. I mean, there was massive agrarian opposition to the thanks, Miracle Girl. Yes, I'm gonna keep running my mouth. You know it. Thank you for the can. Much love to you. There was massive agrarian opposition to the Constitution as it was originally written. The coastal manufacturing centers were dominated by these special interest groups. They were more likely to support a strong central government because they felt like it would bring the farmers in line with their thinking. This led to serious contention over representation in the new government. Yet smaller states like New Jersey with smaller populations were worried about the states with larger populations like Virginia, which were mainly farmers, having too much pull in Congress. This is how they decided on the compromise that would make the House dependent on the population of the different districts, which would benefit the larger states, but making the higher house, the Senate, with a fixed number of representatives to give all the states an equal voice, right? The New Jersey-Virginia Compromise. This is where that came from. They wanted to make sure that the people had their house, but also to protect the smaller states. So they were able to find some compromises there. Thank you, Jay Brewskis, for the cookie. Much love to you. Thank you for the ship, Alara, to get the fuck out of here and head to the moon when the time comes. Yeah, somebody get me off this rock, right? For sure. For sure. What up, Geert? Good to see you. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here with us. Yeah, but I mean, so there were 100 arguments about how this was going to work, right? And like I said, um, they were asking questions like, which form of government, like a large national republic or a confederation of small republics, was going to be more likely to preserve and protect personal liberties. They were asking like, can a larger republic, based on the principle of the consent of the governed, sufficiently protect the rights and the liberties of the individual states and the people? Should the federal legislature be able to repeal state laws in order to impose federal laws for the purpose of promoting the general welfare or common defense of the nation? One of the most famous anti-feds that wrote under the pseudonym Brutus, he argued that in a republic, the manners, the sentiments, and the interests of the people should be similar. If not, there's going to be a constant clashing of opinions, and that the representatives of one part will constantly be striving against the other. So he wondered, should a republic be made up of a small group of like-minded people, or is diversity of opinion beneficial to the success of the federal government overall? Like, these were the questions they were asking, right? And so they came with these essays and these speeches and these treatises and these questions that they put out in these newspapers. Like I said, it was an early form propaganda war. And I want to start with what they call Anti-Federalist Paper number 1, right? The title of which is A Dangerous Plan of Benefit Only to the Aristocratic Combination, right? A dangerous plan of benefit that is only, a dangerous plan of benefit only to the aristocratic combination. Because like I said, these guys were seriously concerned about creating some new entrenched monarchy, no matter what we called it, that's what it would become de facto, that it would in fact be some kind of, give me the beat, yeah, right? That it would become some sort of authoritarian nightmare. And this was written by a guy that was like a OG troll, right? Because when he published this, he called himself the Federalist, right? So calling himself a Federalist is like trolling the elites, right? This was published in the Boston Gazette and Country Journal. And this guy was on point, right? He argued basically that when you give power to bankers and lawyers and industrialists and the elite, that their desire for power becomes insatiable. That these guys are going to grow it ad infinitum, right? That the self-interest of the ruling class will always outweigh the interest of the people. And one of his most famous lines from this, and I'm going to go through some of this with you guys, is that I'd rather be a free citizen of the small Republic of Massachusetts than an oppressed subject of the great American Empire. I can dig it, man. I can dig it. And what's crazy is that from the beginning, these guys are arguing against the quashing of information. We're going to need a nature break, and we're requesting squirrels with lasers, please. Do we need to take a nature break, guys? Is this shit heavy? Like, I know I get amped up, but like, I get really pissed when I see what's going on, man. I can't help it. Like, I get mad. I think that they've bastardized our system. I think that these people were exactly right, that the elites have twisted things to benefit their own self-interest. That they've twisted the shit, man. And then they tell you that your thoughts are wrong. They tell you you're guilty of wrongthink, which is horseshit. Because these guys were thinking the same thing. Right? It's horseshit. I mean, the Federalist says the hideous demon of aristocracy has hitherto had so much influence as to bar the channels of investigation preclude the people from inquiry, and extinguish every spark of liberal information of its qualities. They were being censored then. Their inquiry was being smashed down then, right? They wanted to bar the people from investigation or information then, because when they put out the Constitution prior to the Bill of Rights, because remember, those are amendments, right? When they put out the Constitution, these guys were like, listen, it's all or nothing. You're going to vote on it and accept it, or get to stepping, right? They wanted it all or nothing. And the Anti-Federalists were like, hell no, I'm not signing that like this. Like, you're going to have to give me something. You're going to have to give us something, right? Which is how they got the Bill of Rights. And like I said, I'm going to get to that, right? So already these guys are arguing about how their intellectual investigation of the Constitution itself was being smashed by the things that were being printed in the newspapers at the time. I mean, you got to understand, this is like, that's their internet at the day. He said that those furious zealots who are for cramming it down the throats of the people without even allowing them time or opportunity to scan or weigh it in the balance of their understandings, bear the same marks in their features as those who have been long wishing to erect an aristocracy, right? Their menacing cry is for a rigid government. It matters little to them what kind. They brand, this should speak to a lot of you guys. They brand with infamy every man who is not as determined and zealous in its favor as themselves. They cry aloud, the whole must be swallowed or none at all. Thinking thereby to preclude any amendment, they're afraid of having it abated of its present rigid aspect. They have strived to overawe or seduce printers to stifle and obstruct a free discussion. They were trying to stop the Anti-Federalists from even being able to print their arguments in the newspapers. Zuckerberg much? Like, these guys were getting zucked in the 1700s. It's crazy. They've endeavored to hasten it to a decision before the people can duly reflect upon its properties. And these guys weren't having that. The Federalist goes on to argue that compulsive or treacherous measures to establish any government whatever will always excite a jealousy among free people. Better to remain single and alone than blindly adopt whatever a few individuals shall demand. Right? What are we laughing about? The Zuck? Oh, don't say erecting around foil, right? Yes. Guys, yeah, we definitely don't want to talk about any kind of erecting at the moment, right? I'm kind of on a roll here, or at least at least I feel like I am. Uh, what else we got going on? Yes, Scott Robinson, exactly, right? Hey, Yuvonda, good to see ya. What up, Divine Fractal? Glad you're here. Um, yeah, so I mean, obviously these people were pissed, right? And they found a way to publish these things regardless of the intimidation of the Federalists, regardless of them going to the newspapers and trying to get them to refuse to publish these things. They just weren't having it, right? And he gives them a little bit of credit. He says it'll be first allowed that many undesigning citizens may wish its adoption from the best motives. Like, there are probably a lot of people that really believe that these vax mandates are for the best of everybody. They might believe that in their heart, but is that what the power brokers think? Or is this just another method of control for them? Right? He said, but these people that think they're acting out of their best motives, that they're modest and silent when compared to the greater number who endeavor to suppress all attempts for investigation. He goes on to finish up. These consist generally of the noble order of Cincinnatus, holders of public securities, men of great wealth and expectations of public office, bankers and lawyers. These, with their train of dependents from the aristocratic combination, the lawyers in particular, he says, keep up an incessant declamation for its adoption. Like greedy gudgeons, they long to satiate their voracious stomachs with the golden bait. The numerous tribunals to be erected by the new plan of consolidated empire will find employment for 10 times their present numbers. These are the loaves and fishes for which they hunger. If you give these people power, they will magically multiply that shit like Jesus did with the loaves and the fishes, man. This is the golden bait. And what have we seen happen today? They've grown their power. They've grown their power to the point that now we've got special interests and industrialists and tech, these tech overlords that I don't think our government even has any control over. Right? They've grown so much, they've grown outside of the control of the government that gave them breath. It's wild, man. It's wild. Another good anti-federalist paper that was written by a guy that called himself Montezuma, right? I mean, that's a hell of a name. Uh, Thanks, Alara. That's a hell of a name for a dude to rock with, right? Montezuma. Somebody in Pennsylvania. I don't think that they've been able to determine who this guy was. I mean, he titled "A Consolidated Government is Tyranny." It's tyranny, right? He argued basically that the Senate and the president would be protectors of the elite class, right? That anti-elitism was actually arguing for a direct democracy at the local level as the best way to protect liberty. Montezuma argued against the Senate as protectors in impeachment and natural entrenchment of the senators, which we've seen. He even argued against the Senate sitting above the House, which is supposed to be of the people, because then the Senate would be repping the union instead of repping their states. And it's great because his first point of argument is that most people are sheep, right? Most people are sheep, but we still want to indulge them. We still want to indulge these sheep and let them participate in governing. But he was worried that the House specifically would be driven by the cultural winds. And he says, as a majority of all societies consist of men who, though totally incapable of thinking or acting in governmental matters, are more readily led than driven. Most men are more readily led than driven. They're sheep, right? But we still gotta let them have a voice, even if they're sheep, right? Even if we don't agree, which I thought was interesting. I mean, he goes on to say that in a very short time, these people, they might think and act like us, but they're going to be, they might initially be independent of popular whims and prejudices, but after a while, where does that even take us? You want to keep your power. You get in there, you want to keep your power, and so you start saying what people want to hear, and then maybe you do something else behind. All you're worried about is re-election, right? LT5 says, we have a corporatocracy, follow the money, always. Thank you, hubby, for the ship. Much love to you. Glad you're still hanging out here. Yeah, so I mean, Montezuma came with it hard. Said that consolidating government, is a tyranny. It would definitely lead to tyranny. I mean, they questioned the court system. They had a real problem. They had a real problem with the idea of an overarching federal court system being able to shoot down what was decided in the states. Again, this is a question of localized power, of representing the people of their areas. Like, again, what does New York have to say about what's going on in Texas? Why should there be a federal court that is able to make that final decision? And even though obviously I'm a great supporter of the Constitution, but thank God for these guys, right? Thank God for these guys. It's crazy. Anti-Federalist 17. Federalist power will ultimately subvert state authority. One of the main arguments was examining the elastic clause, which I was showing you guys earlier, the supremacy clause, which I showed you earlier. Brutus, the most famed of the anti-federalists, he was arguing about the interstate commerce system, the judicial system being supreme at the federal level. Like I said, they saw this as something that would only grow. That the mechanisms of the Constitution, right? These clauses and things that they had written in, those things combined with the innate desire of human beings in power to expand that power could only drive this into a behemoth, man. And he said, it's the truth, confirmed by the unerring experience of the ages, that every man, every body of men invested with power are ever disposed to increase it. They had learned this lesson over and over and over again. That's why they were fighting. That's why they fought the war, right? Against tyrannical power. No representation. And again, now I want to get back to the Bill of Rights before I wrap this tirade up, right? The final Anti-Federalist paper, well, there's one more, but damn near the end. Anti-Federalist paper number 84, again written by Brutus, was specifically addressing the lack of a Bill of Rights. You got to remember, like I told you, they were trying to force these guys to accept the Constitution all or nothing. Had these guys not spoken up, we may not have enumerated liberties today, right? The Federalists argued that a Bill of Rights wasn't needed because the power to suppress the press and religion and whatnot wasn't specifically granted in the Constitution. They assumed that powers not granted to the government wouldn't be assumed by the government. Now, that's the most naive shit I've ever heard. Because as Biden shows us every day, they will find a workaround. Isn't that what Psaki called it? A workaround? Or was that Biden himself? Right? They literally assumed that powers not explicitly granted to the government in the Constitution just wouldn't be assumed by the government. They were just going to be like, oh, well, this document doesn't tell us that, anything about that, so we're just going to stay out of that. That is not how this works. The anti-feds were like, well, if that's the case, then you shouldn't have a problem with us just going ahead and specifying that then, right? In Alexander Hamilton himself, in Federalist 84, right? The opposite of this, in Federalist 84, specifically argued against a Bill of Rights. Alexander Hamilton argued against a Bill of Rights. Not only should we specify the scope of government power, but we should explicitly state what it cannot do. Hey, Be the Light, thank you for the can. A can of White Claw for Alara's hardworking highlighter. Yeah, Alara was not highlighting today, but yes, her highlighter definitely needs a can of Claw for sure, right? For sure. Yeah, but I think we need to. As a matter of fact, I think we need to expand the explicitly stated list of shit the government cannot do. Right? I don't think we have enough protected liberties. Clearly. And thank God, at a critical juncture in all of this infighting, one of the wisest of our founding fathers, Virginia's James Madison, who was originally also an opponent of the idea of the Bill of Rights, came to the realization that the Federalists had to get out in front of this issue before the whole constitutional effort was jeopardized. Right? And finally, by December 15th of 1791, 3/4 of the states ratified 10 of the amendments, and then they took their place in the constitutional framework as the Bill of Rights. Now explicitly protected, freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly and petition, the right to keep and bear arms, due process, freedom from self-incrimination, double jeopardy. These were important, right? And Brutus says, when a building is to be erected, which is intended to stand for ages, the foundation should be firmly laid. The Constitution proposed to your acceptance is designed not for yourselves alone, but for generations yet unborn. The principles, therefore, upon which the social compact is founded ought to have clearly and precisely stated, and the most express and full declaration of rights to have been made. Right? He said if we can collect the sentiments of the American people from their own declaration that they hold these truths as self-evident, that all men are by nature free, no one man therefore, or any class of men, have a right by the law of nature or of God to assume or exercise authority over their fellows. The origin of society, then, is to be sought not in any natural right which one man has over another, but in the consent of those who associate it. This is where he is arguing for. This is about the consent of the governed, right? We have to give them our consent, which is why I tell you your strongest play is I don't consent. Thank you, Belushi, for the cookie. You know, that's your strongest argument right now. I ain't down with that. I don't consent. So I mean that's there's obviously a lot here. You know, I want to go through this more in depth with you guys. You know, I'll do probably a part 2 and break down. Maybe we'll go line by line and maybe look at the arguments like back and forth between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. I was just trying to give you guys a general overview. And I hope you have a better understanding because this shit is more relevant now than ever, right? So, man, learn if you haven't read these, learn the thought processes of these guys so that you can make these arguments when they're raised because they will be raised. They are being raised, right? This shit with the mandates, man, you can see these arguments at play in real time. In real time. It amazes me. It amazes me that we have been able to stick together as long as we have. Because they have bred such a dichotomy of opinion in this country in the same way they did back then. You know, this is why they pushed the division, man. This right here, this is why. And we have good arguments for our beliefs. Our founding fathers gave them to us. Regardless of how they try to twist the Constitution or regardless of what they try to tell you or how they try to church some shit up, right, in the media, we have the answers. They were given to us by our founding fathers. I hope this was enlightening for you guys. I appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with me. Sly Park, thank you for the can. Share Within, thank you for the shades. Oh shit, let me go over and give you guys some lemons and some scratchings. God forbid, hopefully I can click on some stuff. I'm trying to think. I will be live Friday with Tyler Koala, naturally, doing my conspiracy theory trivia at 8. I hope you guys do come hang out for that. You know, I like to do my conspiracy thing. But my true fire is for this shit. 100%. 100%. So the scratching is released. Let me go over here and give you guys your lemons. I cannot thank you guys enough for being here with me today. Much love to you. Oh, look at that. Look at the Quate awakening. When you leave here, you should go over and say hi to Quate. Tell her I sent you. All right, what up, LA Addicts? Nick Houston, good to see ya. Georgia Patriot, Keese, much love to you guys. Thank you, Suki, for the diamonds. Thank you, Duppy, and Sol Rico for the lemons. Let me let this go. See you guys getting your scratching. Yeah, 123 SKG. I would love to continue this discussion. Maybe next time we'll do like an interactive. I'll do some call-ins or something. You know, see what you guys have to say on the matter. You know, this just really was moving me recently. I really felt compelled to speak on this, and I hope it was. I'm glad you guys spent this time with me. So much love to you all, and until next time. Thank you, Karen Hare. I see the Cash App. I love you. Thank you, Mike Montana, for the can. Much love to you. Much love to